Welcome to episode 9 of Aminul's World. This week I had my lovely friend Rahul join me. I met him a few months ago. He's a pharmacist who's also working on the front line, and he's helping everybody out in the community because a lot of people need their medications and a lot of people who are in the vulnerable group have had to self-isolate. So he's dealing with this high pressure of trying to deliver everybody their medication and make sure they have the supplies they need because people are also worried that they might run out. So he's under an immense amount of pressure right now, working in the community with his parents who've also stepped in to help during this pandemic. And the exhaustion that we usually feel is very different right now. Rahul says that he's not physically tired like he usually is, but more of an emotional tiredness has kicked in, and it kind of feels like we're running on fumes now. And it's quite scary to say that because we do have a long few months ahead of us with this pandemic. But apart from his work as a pharmacist, Rahul set out to start a project he had in his mind for 10 years when he was starting off at university, and it's blossomed into the Apne project. He's always had this in the back of his mind to celebrate the success of creators in our community, and his idea of success comes from a place which is so selfless, and it's all about his hard work. Nothing is ever about the numbers or the views or the social media fame, and I can really see that when I work with Rahul. He makes a very good point that nowadays in the creative industry we have so many content creators who are working just for the numbers, and I think we're all capable of seeing through that. But Rahul's work comes from a place of so much dedication, and a lot of his work and a lot of his methods of creating this project have inspired me in my own stuff as well. So this episode was definitely the pick-me-up that I needed this week. It was so nice to talk to him, and I'm sure it'll help all of you at home as well who are either isolating or working from home. I'm sure this will give you the pickup that you need with all the news that we're seeing. So without further ado, here's Rahul. Welcome to the show, Rahul, and thanks for joining me today. I know you've had a busy day like most healthcare workers, well, all frontline workers, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, the day has been very, very busy, but to be honest with you, I can't even remember how long it's been now. Probably a month or so. It all seems to be just one big blur at the moment, but it's been a pretty testing time that you can obviously completely understand the situation as well.
Yeah. Well, I don't actually remember when the chaos started either. It's just you just go into every day knowing that it's going to be chaotic. There's going to be a lot of things that you need to do, and you're going to be quite drained out by the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you kind of said it. It's just, in a way, it's that you don't know what's happening. The one thing that I've had to learn very quickly is that you just have to take things like this on a day-to-day basis, especially because we don't know what's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're, in a weird way, it's like we're watching a film or reading a book, and you just don't know what's happening on the next page or the next chapter. And that comes with like a cocktail of anxiety or apprehension, and in a weird way some excitement as well, because we're part of something which we may never ever see again or may have never seen before. But at the same time it's coming with, like I said, a lot of anxiety and a lot of concern for something which is just it's a pandemic, isn't it? And there's no other way to really describe it.
Yeah, I feel like we're all trying to come to terms with it in some way, but once we do come to terms with it, something new comes up. So we see like there's going to be a peak next week, or something else has come up, something else going to happen, or the lockdown is going to be for much longer than we expected. So I think coming to terms with it will probably never happen with any of us because it's changing so rapidly. But Rahul, you're working in a community chemist, is that right? So you're a pharmacist working in the community, and are you working with your family in the pharmacy right now?
So at the moment, this is my dad's community chemist. So we have two practices, one based in West London, so one in Southall, and one more northwest London in Uxbridge area. So both my parents are community pharmacists. And my dad set up his practices, the one in Southall, just under 40 years ago.
Wow.
So it's actually my first year working there full time. So my background prior to that was working in hospitals for about 6 years of my career.
Yeah.
Of which I specialised in cancer. and stem cell transplant. And it was last summer, essentially, I transitioned from working full-time in the hospitals to now working full-time in primary care and within the community pharmacy setup.
So why did you make that change?
I think it came down to kind of what I had achieved in a way, and what I had kind of done. Like, I started off my training in hospital and very quickly got into a position where I wanted to know that I wanted to specialize in a particular area, and that was in cancer, solid tumor, and also hematological cancer. And I kind of developed the skills that I wanted, and kind of progressed to kind of like a quite high leadership role and a high clinical role. And I wanted to then challenge myself further. Not saying that I kind of completed hospital pharmacy, because you can never complete anything within science, but I wanted to therefore learn more skills. And what you learn in hospital, you may not learn in different aspects of different parts of the healthcare setup. So I saw it as a challenge, and I did actually both at the same time. So I was working at 2 different hospital trusts, and then working within primary care, and then I just decided to take the opportunity to see what the primary care world was all about. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to potentially stay here for the rest of my life within there, because there's a lot of aspects. Yeah.
What is it like working within a family business? Because obviously you come from a South Asian background, and is there any sort of pressure from your family to make sure that you're running it after a certain time, or is it just really chilled out and you just work with mom and dad? And
no, there's no pressure at all. I think the pressure just comes within the pressures that we create ourselves, or the pressures that are kind of thrown upon us, like a pandemic. But when it comes down to like working within a family business, we don't really, of course, there's business aspects to it, but we're first and foremost healthcare professionals, right? And our priority isn't business and finance; it's the patient, right?
Yeah.
And there's no pressure at all. I think my dad and my mum have done the hard work. Like, they set up a practice about 40 years ago, or just under 40 years ago, and credit to them. It's there at the moment, and it's flourishing and providing a place for people within the community to come and receive expert healthcare advice and information, and it's down to their hard work. So actually the pressure in a way for me has been completely taken off, because they've put in that just under 40 years of work to create that. And actually I'm coming in and just using my expertise and learning as well. Like, it's a huge learning curve for me, going from like a completely clinical environment to an environment where you think about different things. You're looking directly at the community and what's happening with the community health, rather than being in such a specific niche area when I was doing stem cell transplant. But coming down to the pressure aspect, no, not at all. And one thing about pressure, I always think it's kind of pressure only exists like if you create it, if you put it on yourself, right?
I guess so.
Yeah. And
except for when there's a pandemic. When there's a pandemic, there's
exactly.
There's
but
a lot of pressure.
I like to think this pandemic. Well, okay, once that's it, we're done now, right?
Yeah.
It's obviously things like this which just fling you into a world that you don't know. Then obviously we don't know. Like we said earlier, we have no idea what's going on, right? So that pressure is just going to come from a world of unknown, isn't it?
Yeah. But Rahul, before I go into your parents' background, I just want to ask you quickly about how it's been working as a pharmacist during this pandemic, because I've been working with pharmacists in the hospital, and their workload has changed quite a bit, in the sense that they're trying to discharge patients to get them home, because we want to get all the patients out. So they have that workload in terms of making sure that patients have the medications to get home. But from your side, it would be quite different, because a lot of people who come to your chemist are either vulnerable or part of the elderly, maybe cannot even commute to the pharmacy. And I'm sure you're getting a lot of people who may run out of meds, and you need to supply that to them. So what kind of pressure are you facing in the community right now?
Masses, like it's that word masses amount of like the work that we're doing it's hard to put into words, because if you think about it from a community setup, a lot of the general practitioners, so the doctors, their doors are technically closed. They're not physically seeing patients, so they're seeing patients, whether it be through virtual clinics or over telephone calls, and their workload is ridiculously high, because obviously there's patients who are concerned about COVID itself. There's patients who have just other healthcare problems. And the workload for us is just, I wouldn't be able to put a figure on it, but it's completely skyrocketed. And like you said, we've got vulnerable patients. We've got patients coming to see us. And when the doors are closed with the GP surgeries, the dentists are closed, the opticians are closed, they're all coming to us. And what we've seen at the moment is that the panic that came a few weeks ago and has consistently been that level of panic is that we're having to supply so much medicine to patients to ensure that those who are vulnerable or need to be shielded and stay at home have adequate resources so that their conditions can stay stable. And working and having our practice in a very predominantly South Asian area, we have a lot of patients who suffer from heart problems, diabetes, and there's a lot of concern. And a lot of these patients have received letters from the government for them to stay at home. And we've seen so many prescriptions coming in for patients who need to have their medicines. And then we've had, even prior to lockdown, the amount of patients that came in just because they were just frightened with symptoms of cough, symptoms of fever. And when the doors are closed for them to go to the doctors, understandably, they come straight to us. So like I said, like the last 4 weeks have just been a big blur because it's just been, we've had so many anxious patients and patients coming to see us, and it doesn't look like it's slowing down.
Does it drain you emotionally as well, Rahul? Because from a doctor's point of view in the hospital, I've moved from medicine now. I'm working in the oncology department, and obviously now a lot of patients have had their treatments changed and maybe even delayed in some cases. And I came home this weekend and I felt a different kind of tired. It wasn't I've been running around all day, like I'm physically tired. It was like mentally I'm exhausted, and you run out of things to say to these people. Like, what can you say to comfort them? Do you face the same thing in the pharmacy?
Yeah, completely agree. And it's a different kind, you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's a completely different type of tiredness. Initially, when in maybe the 2 weeks prior to lockdown, I was probably physically exhausted because there was lots of running around. We had 20 to 30 people queuing outside our chemist. Now it's mentally draining because we're having patients coming in whose relatives may have passed away and we're speaking to them. Patients who have been with us for 10, 20, 30 years who are no longer with us. And like you said, you don't know what to say. Apart from being empathetic and understanding, but then at the same time, it's often that you can't understand because nobody really understands anything right now, right? And we understand things from a science point of view, but when someone's life is taken away or someone's in hospital or they're terrified, like what can you do or say? And like you said, like it is emotionally draining. And I've noticed that in the last couple of weeks, like I'm coming home and you just sit down for a bit, and when things stop and it's just silent, and you're just like, wow, like this is one, not slowing down, and two, there's so many thoughts that often cross in your head about things that you need to do, things that you need to say, other things that you need to do. And then you're just absolutely knackered. And the amount of times I've fallen asleep on the sofa since coming home, I'm like 28 years old. I shouldn't be falling asleep like at this stage, but it's that draining effect because there's just so many things that are going on, the patients that you see, and then your own thoughts, and then your own life. And, but it's part of the job. And it's something that with experience and time, you learn to develop ways that support your own mental health and your own emotional strength. But other times you just let it be, and you're just like, you know what, this is a tough time right now, and we're going to ride through it, right? And I'm guessing you feel that as well. Obviously, you've been in. You're currently working.
I don't know, Rahul. I really haven't had much time to process how I feel. I realized I felt bouts of certain emotions like sadness, anger, stress. There have been times like yesterday, for example. I remember I came home a bit earlier than I usually do, but I thought, I'll just use this time to wind down. But I just felt so emotionally numb that you just don't know how you feel, just don't know what to do. And this is the thing, Rahul. I feel like I'm feeling emotions at extremes.
Yeah,
I'm not able to process everything. So even today, you probably saw on my Instagram, like I've been seeing people sharing all this hate towards China, the Chinese government, and Muslims, especially in India. And all of a sudden, like it just, flicked a trigger. And I was getting so angry. I'm like, what are people actually doing? Do people really realize what's happening, Rahul? Because you can see it, I can see it. We are seeing suffering on a level we've never witnessed before, right? Not just from the patients, but from their families as well. And I'm sure family members are coming to you saying, this has happened to my grandfather or my mother, and I need the medicine for this other person in my family, and there's so much to process. There's suffering on a level we've never seen before in our generation, at least. And that's what's really happening, Raul. That's like the real problem right now. The problem isn't like supporting China or supporting Muslim. It's like got nothing to do with that whatsoever. We have to strip all that off. So I've been feeling extremes of emotions, and I'm very aware of that. But I'm also really aware that I just haven't had the time to process it. And there will be a time where I will process it and understand what's really happening. But our jobs are so fast paced that we just don't get a chance to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, sometimes it would just hit you at a random moment, and it could be something that's triggered you, or it could just come out of nowhere. And I completely agree with what you said, because it just hits you at a random time. And it's often when it's just silent. That's what I find. And you allow your thoughts.
Are your parents still working now as well?
So both. Well, my dad, he would consider himself semi-retired.
Right.
So he's winding down after working for so many years. But obviously, he's coming in to support me at the moment, because right now it's all about teamwork. And with his experience, it's helping me so much, especially transitioning from obviously hospital pharmacy into a completely different environment. And the huge difference, obviously, between being a community pharmacist and a pharmacist in hospital is that we're not directly surrounded by other healthcare professionals like our doctors and nurses. It's very much our teams within its own building. But obviously, the other healthcare professionals are only a phone call away, but it's different. So you have to learn to adapt in that way. And my mum's working at the moment, so she's working in a local community pharmacy. And she's putting in like an incredible shift at the moment to try and support as well. So at the moment, everyone's kind of like
chipping in
and just full steam ahead. And one amazing thing that I read recently, I think in the last couple of days, was, and similar with the doctors and nurses, the amount of like retired or semi-retired healthcare professionals that are kind of in a way joining our healthcare. I'm going to call them an army.
I think it's really touching to see that. But also, Rahul, my biggest worry is that they're also in the vulnerable group. Most of them are 60 plus, so they're putting their lives at risk to save us and to save the younger population as well. But how are your parents dealing with this pandemic? Because I've seen my parents initially they were quite blasé about it. So they're in Gibraltar right now, and there's a population of 30,000 there. I think they're just past 100 mark in terms of the number of cases they have. So I think about 50 of them have recovered and 50 are in treatment right now. But the issue is that my parents got worried when they opened a Nightingale there as well. So they opened another hospital in preparation. So my parents are thinking, well, they've obviously opened it because they're expecting a surge of cases. And because we're next to Spain as well, there's a bit of a worry there. I think the Gibraltar government have done really well to contain the virus, but obviously it's the unknown, right? So I think my parents are slowly starting to understand the impact this virus can have, and they're taking the measures much more seriously now. But how have your parents felt? Because your mum is still working and she's still going out there. She's still exposing herself.
I think both of them have like very much said to me like they've never seen anything like this before. Like my mum was raised in Iran and was living there during like the civil unrest, and she was saying that this is nothing in comparison to that, and that was pretty bad. And in a way, she was comparing like an actual physical war. Now comparing it technically is a war what we're dealing with now. And similarly with my dad, like he's seen and gone through so many things in his life. He's seen obviously lots of political unrest in his life, other issues, other healthcare issues that have affected community pharmacy and pharmacy as a whole, for example, like the other pandemics that we've had, and other issues like terrorist attacks when they occurred like in the 60s and 70s. And he said he has never seen anything like this before. And
really?
Yeah, and for them, they're just like, this is so new. And in a really weird way, it's quite comforting to hear that, because when I've only been in healthcare working, like I qualified in 2014, and for me, like I've never seen anything like this before. And there was that panic that came, and I was like, oh my God, like what is this? How do we deal with this? And in a really weird way, it's comforting to hear when someone says like, we haven't heard this before.
Yeah.
And they've been working for 40, 30 years. And it comes with that comfort, because you realize this virus or this disease is non-discriminatory. It affects everyone, and we are all in this together. But like their health is completely fine. Everyone's taking the appropriate precautions that we can with what we have available to us. And that's it. Like you mentioned earlier, it's all about that cohesion and that community aspect together.
Where was your dad raised, Rahul?
As he was raised in Nairobi.
Oh, so he was in Kenya.
Yeah.
So when he moved from Kenya, did he move during the political unrest as well? When everyone sort of moved off from Kenya and came to the UK?
So he actually left Kenya when he was quite young, and he moved to the UK to study. So that's where he did his pharmacy degree. So the political unrest I was talking about is actually the political unrest in the UK. So during that period, so he's seen a lot. Like I said, like when I spoke to him about this before it really kind of surged, and we were kind of talking about this like maybe 5-6 weeks ago when we were seeing cases in China, and as it slowly started to spread in Italy, he was like, yeah, I've never seen anything like this. And then when it hit the UK, it was just further. He was just like, this is extremely worrying. And I think it hit home even more when we were starting to see, like I said, how non-discriminatory this is, and how it can affect everybody and anyone, regardless of your age, regardless of your genetics. If you've got comorbidities or if you're otherwise young, fit and healthy, it's ruthless.
Yeah. I think we're seeing it right at the front as well. Yeah. We're seeing our own patients, our own community suffer from this. And it's going to be a long few weeks now, Rahul. And I just hope you pace yourself and you take it easy. I'm trying to do that as well. I know it's easier said than done, but let's move from the pandemic and let's try to talk about nicer things now.
Okay.
And let's do because apart from what you do in the pharmacy, and apart from the amazing work you're doing right now on the front line during this pandemic, you also do a lot of other really incredible things, Rahul.
Thank you.
I remember when I first found your page, which was Apne project.
Yeah.
A few months ago, and I started, we started talking, and we became good friends after that. And we started to learn a lot from each other and have some interesting conversations about what it means to be a South Asian in this generation. And so for those of you who are listening right now, Rahul has a page on Instagram, and he's working on this Apne project where he's interviewed a lot of change makers and activists, and he talks to them about their views on society and our community. And Rahul interviewed me, and I have to say, I mean, he really dug deep with me. he really caught me, and he asked me a lot of questions, which I still think about to this day, Rahul, because the questions you asked me made me really think about my own identity. But before we go into that, Rahul, what inspired you to start this specific project?
So this project is, I would say, 10 years overdue.
10 years?
Yeah, 10 years overdue. And I won't go on a massive monologue about it. But basically, so 10 years ago, I was at university studying, obviously, pharmacy. And I don't know what triggered it, but I always wanted to do some work. Well, I was a bit concerned about the lack of representation within like media, or the lack of seeing our faces and like brown faces, men, women, on like radio or TV or whatever. And I could only ever remember those faces that I saw were the cast of Goodness Gracious Me. And that was it. Like, I think everyone kind of in our generation just remember people like Sanjeev Bhaskar and Meera Syal. That's it. Those are like the claim to fames, right? And then you had like Rishi Rich and Jay Sean. And I remember I had my own radio show at Portsmouth University, and that was all about South Asian music. And at that moment, I wanted to do a project about exploring the lack of South Asian creatives. And this was 10 years ago. So what, 2009, 2010. I didn't do anything about it. I had an idea, and I think fear might have stopped me. And I just didn't do anything. And then 10 years later, so last summer, I think I finished a shift at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, walked into the newsagent next to, I actually built into the hospital, and I saw GQ magazine. And I don't normally buy magazines or anything, but I saw on the front cover of GQ was Riz Ahmed. And I was like, Riz Ahmed. I was like, this is the guy from Four Lions. I've been following his music. I've been following so much of his stuff for the last 10, 15 years. And the guy's on the front cover of GQ. And I was like, and I think at that moment, I had a flashback to being at university thinking, would we have ever seen someone like Riz Ahmed? And by that, I mean a brown face on the front cover of arguably one of the biggest like men's fashion magazines in the world. And at that moment, I was just like, boom, I'm going to do a project, and I'm actually going to do this now. And I'm not going to explore a negative notion of why is there a lack of representation or why aren't South Asians being represented. I'm going to flip it and say, you know what? Diversity is increasing. We're maybe not at the level where we want it to be, but why don't we celebrate those who have achieved or who are achieving in a way that it can inspire other people to realize that it is possible to do something. And that all came from just seeing Riz Ahmed's face in front of GQ, basically.
Wow.
And that's what created the Apne project.
So, Rahul, you've got some really interesting people on your project. And for those of you listening, if you just pop into his Instagram, you can find a few episodes that Rahul has released. And you had Mim Sheikh, you had Planet Parlay, you had Parlay Patel, you had
Rita Loy.
You had a lot of Rita Loy, sorry, there was someone who just followed me today. Her name was Rita Aurora, and I just got the names. But Rita Loy as well. And these are people who are very busy. They have very busy schedules. And as someone who's in the same sort of industry, in terms of the creative industry, I have this. I probably face what you face as well, which is like, well, these guys are doing so well in their career. These guys are probably so busy. Why would they want to be part of my project if I contact them? So how did you get these big names to be part of what you did, what you're doing right now?
So I always look at things from a notion of they're going to say yes, or they are going to reply to the email or the DM. And that's not from a place of like being like big-headed or anything. It's the reason I was so confident that people would respond back to me from this project is because the project's all about celebration. We're celebrating people who are doing incredible things. And at the same time, each individual is opening the door to talk about topics which they are passionate about and they want to talk about, but it affects the whole community. And when I wanted to do the project, I said, like, in a way, in my mind, I was like, I want to serve it to the best possible way, and have a mixture of people who are relatively known in their respective industries or within their respected areas, and people who are change makers or people who want to talk about certain things. And I just sent off DMs on Instagram, or I just emailed people if I could find their contact details. And fortunately enough, out of, I think maybe about 500 people I messaged, a small number responded.
So it took you 500 messages to get how many people?
So far we've recorded, I'm going to get this wrong, I think 15 videos. And it never fazed me. Like, I knew, like, I'm not going to probably get 500 people, but that's fine because I'm a random guy with a random Instagram account that's DMing somebody who's probably got like so many followers. Like I messaged people like Jay Shetty, Hassan Minaj, like the biggest names out there, and then people who had smaller accounts, but respectively the work that they're doing, it doesn't matter what their Instagram follower is, right? That doesn't matter. And I thought, if one person responds, great, because we can create something, create a conversation. And I've always said to myself, the mark of success for this project isn't about numbers. It isn't about how big this gets. It's about if we can inspire one person, that's a mark of success from this. And going back to kind of like how we created this, I was just like, when you have an idea and I wanted to serve it justice, it was message these people, have a phone call conversation with them and get them in the studio and let's just talk. And in a way, I am basically winging it. And it seems to be doing all right so far.
Yeah. No, you're doing a really great job, Rahul. And I think the most impressive thing for me when we first got in touch was the way you carry this project out in such a professional manner. Uh, when we talk about meeting other creatives in the industry and we talk about how we deal with our own projects, it's very difficult to sort of see our own projects as like a second job, right? Because we will come home from work after a long day and then we'll be like, yeah, I'll just write a blog, I'll just make a website, whatever, and I'll just write it and I'll put it out there. But that wasn't the case with you. You were like, I want to create something, but I want to produce it, I want to edit it, and I want to create something that's of very high quality. And that doesn't take 1 day or 2 days to do. There's a setup that you need, there's money that you need, there's other people that you need to help you because you can't do this all single-handedly. So how did you go about the funding, the organization, and sort of getting everything in place to interview each individual that you currently have so far?
So I guess it improves in a way with each round of interviews. So when we first recorded with Mim Sheikh, I basically reached out to like a videographer. I didn't know the individual. Actually, to put it really like paint a picture, on the day that we filmed with Mim, all three of us in the room, so myself, the videographer, and Mim had never met each other before. And we just turned up together. And
wow,
as we've done more episodes, it's got slightly better and my organization's got better with it. But the way that I've kind of planned it was obviously after having the conversation with the respected individual and kind of creating a date for it, we basically explore the theme. So kind of how like I spoke to you over the phone, we looked at, what is something that you would like to talk about? If you were given an opportunity to open the door or in a way kick the door down and talk about something that you really want to get off your chest or just explore something, what would it be? And actually this whole project is about that individual. And it's the opportunity for that individual to talk about something that they're really passionate about. And that's kind of how I build it. So each person kind of explores a set theme. And then what we do on the project is basically build the episode with the individual. And that's kind of how we do it. So with each individual, we kind of understand what theme they want to explore or what multiple themes they want to explore. And we kind of bring it there on the day. And what I've tried to do with it, obviously, initially we were kind of like a small team. We're now kind of growing with the people that are involved. So obviously I'm now working very closely with my cousin, Aurora Productions. So he's he is like the key editor now behind my project. And I've worked with a range of different videographers. And one thing that I've always wanted to do with this project is get so many people on board, because I think as a creative, I quite like the idea of just bringing different people on board because everyone has their own ideas. And although this project is something that I'm producing and I'm creating, I always see this as a community project. And what you'll notice is that each episode, they are kind of vastly changing in their aesthetic, in the way that we're filming, in the style of the questions that we're doing, because each episode and each day, like anything in life, you're learning more and more. So if I compare the very first episode with Mim and what we've created now, things are just changing, and it's all come from feedback and ideas from people and working with different people. When we look at funding, that's probably where I struggle the most.
Well, everything is self-funded right now, isn't it? I assume it's same with
absolutely
me.
Everything is self-funded, and obviously I'm in a fortunate position where I was able to start to fund the project with just initial some savings. And that's something which now at the moment, as the project is starting to develop, I'm looking to basically bring people on board, whether it be like private people or private companies that are funding it, or looking to kind of seek through like crowdfunding to get people, if they're interested in the project, to kind of fund it. And I've always, at the moment, I'm actually exploring that quite closely now. And I would love the project to be funded or have elements of it funded, because I could continue to fund it myself. But at the same time, to allow something to grow, we need to create this into, I guess, look at a business model. And I've started to learn that loads, fortunately, because I've interviewed two incredible people from the other box, so Leia and Roshni. So they really told me like their journey, how they created the Other Box from what was something quite small and had to learn business acumen. So one of the episodes with Roshni, she really spoke about like one key advice was all about business acumen. And when she said that to me, I was like, wow, like I need to start thinking of this as a business, because in the element of how to develop something and get people on board so that we can grow this project. So from a funding point of view, absolutely everything right now is funded from pocket, which means not many holidays. But it's okay. Can't travel anywhere now anyway.
Well, it's okay. We're all in lockdown, so
right.
I mean.
But yeah, I'm looking to get the project funded as much as I can. And at the same, looking to work with people who are funding it, who have synergy with the project. So for me, it's not about just getting people to give us money, because it has to be, I want it to be from people and work with people who share the same goals and visions and are from an environment where we all share the same ideas, because otherwise the project loses what the most important thing is, and that's community.
Yeah. But Rahul, you've reached that point of turning your passion, well, not turning your passion, but sort of considering your passion into an avenue where you could, sort of build something from it. And you're a pharmacist already, and this is your side project, but you obviously want it to grow into something where you can be like, well, this is something I could potentially do for the rest of my life, as long as I'm comfortable and it's not affecting me in a financial way. You got to this point a lot quicker than I have, because when I started the podcast, I was still in medical school, and I did that for 4 years. But I think there was some part of my brain where it just kept telling me it's just a hobby. And I never saw it in that way. And I think it's when you're a student and you're just doing all these projects and you're helping out charities, you're helping out the community, time and resources have a completely different notion and definition to when you start earning your own bread and butter. Then you're like, well, this £1 could go here or it could go there. And you start thinking of it in a different way. So Rahul, how do you ground yourself in these moments where you because obviously you don't want to think of it too much from a business point of view, right? You still want it to be your passion, and you still want it to have all the elements that you had 10 years ago, that same drive and fire. So how do you find that balance?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, I look at this as, I still see it as a hobby, as a passion. It's a passion project. And it came from an idea 10 years ago. And I'll always keep it as that. And the one thing I've always said to myself about the project, whenever I speak to people about the project, it's just, like I said, it's always going back, can we inspire one person, right? And that's what keeps me grounded. It's not about the figures. It's not about the likes on Instagram. It's not about how many DMs we get. That stuff's great. That stuff's nice, right? But the work that we're doing and what allows us to stay grounded is that we know that with each video or with each conversation we have, we are potentially creating a space for people to talk. And I think one thing is that this project isn't like a brand new thing, which is like trailblazing in a way. This is completely inspired by so many other pieces of work. And one of the key inspirations behind this, or two key inspirations behind this, was The Good Immigrant by Nika Shukla, and the work by Raj Kaira, who's the founder of the Pink Ludlu Project, who did an amazing piece of work showcasing 25 incredible South Asian women. And this, looking at other people's work who have had an idea and strived to something to celebrate people, that's what allows me to kind of consistently stay motivated, because people out there in so many different communities have done projects, and it's all started from a small idea. And that's what allows me to stay grounded, is to take things with each day, with each video, and not to think of it that it has to be this way. It has to reach a certain number. Yeah. It's like I said, that if we can improve each one and slowly grow, then that's great. And looking back now, I think it's been about possibly a year or just under a year since we first filmed Mim's video. And where we've grown from that, that's when I look back to see where the growth is, that's what allows me to stay grounded and still motivated, because it's progression, right? And that's all it is to me.
Yeah. But it's difficult to have that mindset, Rahul. It's quite difficult, because of course we all want to be humble and grounded in that way and say, actually, it's about the impact we have on people, and it's about what we're producing. That's all that matters. But we live in a generation where numbers mean so much, right? How many listens are you getting? How many followers do you have? And that's what people are chasing. It's really difficult to sort of ignore that sometimes. And I've been a victim of it myself, Rahul. I think just even yesterday I was telling Nishant, I was like, oh, I've got 20 new followers. And Nishant's like, stop looking at the numbers. I was like, yeah, you're right, actually. That's not important. But it does give you that buzz. It's a bit like, it's like a drug that us creatives sometimes get. Like, oh, we're getting followers, we're getting numbers, we're getting this. But then it sort of distracts us from why we started this. So it's very difficult to find that balance, Raul. Yeah. And do you have moments like that where you're just like, oh, I need the numbers, I need the followers, or are you just really good at staying completely?
No, don't get me wrong. Like what you're referring to is dopamine, isn't it? It is a drug. We live in a dopamine. Yeah. I can't remember who spoke about it, but I've seen a video on YouTube where a guy talks about the generation that we're in now. Pretty much everyone has a smartphone. And everyone pretty much either has Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all three of them. And we live in a dopamine generation. When our phone buzzes and we get a like, we upload a selfie, or we upload something. Like when we get likes, we want to hit 100 because it's 3 figures. Then we want to hit 1,000. And we live in that. We live in that world because it makes us feel good. And don't get me wrong, like no one is like completely shut off to that, because numbers, in a way, like I said, like it allows progression, because if 100 people like it, that means 100 people have seen it minimum and they like what you do. But I think the important thing with it is that the numbers for me don't mean anything. Like it would be amazing if we got a million views or something. That's great because people can watch it. But for me, that's not a mark of success with it. Because it's kind of hard to put into words. Like I would say, if I was solely doing this for like numbers and fame, then people will see that people just see through that kind of stuff.
People see through that. Yeah,
it's
you're
not
right.
about that, because if this project was all about fame and like dopamine hits and everything, then we would have done the project in a completely different way. It would have. And one thing that I've always said to myself, this project is, in a way, we could reach out to any of the names that I have, and we could get someone who's like super well known. But if the project doesn't allow that individual to talk about something which opens the door, then it's serving kind of like an ego boost for everyone. And people can see through that. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like when I get a few likes, like I do fashion photography as well. So obviously on a different world, like those numbers, you need that as well. And being published in magazines is great, but I see it as like a mini personal victory. It's like 1% thing for me. It's like if I get a few hundred likes, it's great because people are respecting the work. But I just kind of use it as fuel for the fire. I don't live and swear by the numbers, because if you do, you'll just end up draining yourself and you'll just be staring at your phone about 24 hours a day.
Yeah, it's very short-lived to do it that way. But Rahul, you seem to have surrounded yourself by some really good friends and really good people in the creative industry, because you've met so many people through the Apne project, and I'm sure you stay in touch with them. I mean, I get inspired by speaking to you, and even Roop as well, who's working really hard. And I think it's really important that we all understand that it's a lot of motivation and energy and passion, all of it doesn't come from us as an individual. A lot of it comes from who you spend time with and who you spend your energy with. So I just want to tell our listeners out there that Rahul works very hard. I've seen him work with the Apne project. He does a really great job. And I think, what Rahul is saying is so important, that we don't run for that dopamine when we want to start a project. And Rahul, it could be 10 years until Apne project makes something. Yeah. You just never know. It could be 10 days. But that's not what we're looking at. The point is that we're sharing stories. I mean, I'm doing something quite similar to you. I mean, in the sense I want to share stories and inspire people, and I understand where you're coming from. But as I said, when I was a student, because I hadn't met so many people in the creative industry like yourself and Ruben, I was just in a little bubble. Like, I just need numbers, right? Numbers was everything at that time. So everything's changed in that aspect for me as well. But Rahul, what's your end goal with Apne project? You probably don't have an end goal. I'm sure you're just going by what comes to you. But what's the vision behind Apne project? What do you want to achieve?
So the initial vision when I first kind of strategized it was that I actually wanted to create a book. And that was the initial goal. It was never going to be videos. And that was purely, purely inspired by The Good Immigrant. Because I like to think I like to read. And actually right in front of me, I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8 books in front of me. And it was only until like this year or the back end of last year, I started to become more of an avid reader. But prior to that, I think the few books that I had read was, I think I half read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And like my reading history was bad. Like I don't know if you ever remember the book Ponguiffy. It was like a kid's book about a witch. Like my reading acumen is dreadful. But I picked up The Good Immigrant. I can't remember when it was. Maybe last year at some point, and I couldn't put it down. And I've never read a book so many times. And I think I read the book in one day, and then I read it again and again and again. And I've read it so many times.
Really?
Yeah. And I've never been able to connect to a book before at all. And when I read that, the reason I could connect to it because there were names in there or stories in there that I could relate to. And when I've put the book down, this was at the same time that I was thinking about doing this project. And I was like, I want to do a book that looks at, and Nikesh did a great job with exploring the identity of like Good Immigrant. And I wanted to do a book that was inspired by that, but looking at it from a celebration point of view. And that's when I read Raj's book, or the book that Raj created about the incredible superwomen in the South Asian community. And that's what allowed the project to develop. So Apne project never had a name until quite recently. It was called Identity. And that was the email I was sending to people. The subject was called Identity Project. And I actually only developed it called Apne because when I was explaining to people over the phone, I was saying like, brown people, but I was like, well, brown people sounds a bit colloquial. So I was like, Apne, because Apne to me is just like one of our own. Yeah. And then the project became Apne. So the project was always initially going to be a book. And then I realized that I really like watching like short videos, like, my cousin Roop, who runs Aurora Production, creates short videos. And I was like, why don't we just have a bit of fun with it and just film some stuff? And the end goal for the Apne project is at the moment still, we want to create a book because we want people's stories to be handed down generations. And I have a vision in my mind where we have a book in our hand and someone can pass that book to somebody and that book can then be passed to somebody else. And the identity of sharing something physical like that for me means a lot. Because it reminds you of like sharing like old photos, and we don't do that anymore because everything's digital. And so I guess the end goal for Apne has just kind of morphed into a book, or now it is. We definitely want to create a book. We want to create as many videos as possible. Probably in this year around about 25 stories, and each story is going to be accompanied by a video, and that will be the first phase. And then I've recently thought this out in a lot of depth. So it's since a lot of, we've done a few videos that kind of look down the route of health. So we did a really like incredible piece on the day that you were there with Raveen Kaur, where we explored cancer and fertility. And a lot of people came to her and to me after, and probably as well to you as well, after you did some work with Raveen as well. And we want to explore other themes. So we're going to do like a health series, which looks down the route of like physical health, a series that encompasses mental health, and then a different series which kind of like celebrates people, and lots of different things. So I think that the project will continue to grow. And I think eventually what we're going to do is just try and create a big community and like a platform with this, and work closely with other platforms at the moment. Because it's all about synergy, right? So like you said, like you're doing something as well. There's like 2 incredible women that I've met from the South Asian Sisters Speak, who are doing incredible work as well. And what I really want this is the Apne project to be continually providing stories, and at the same time synergistically working with other people as well, so that we can share stories.
It's all about empowering each other as we go along, right? I think that's a message that is so powerful in itself. Something that we don't see in a lot of industries, in a lot of countries. But there's something about British Asians and South Asians where we really feel for each other. And I can see that. I can really see that, Rahul. I don't see that so much, for example, in India. I've spoken to lots of people there. It's a very different scene over there. But over here, everyone seems to be very understanding and caring and say, okay, how can I help you? Rather than, oh, can you help me? It's a very different ethic over here. And that's why I'm so glad I'm connecting with so many people after I've moved here to the UK. But Rahul, if there is someone out there listening right now who's maybe 18 and maybe is a pharmacist, or someone who has a project that they want to develop, what's one piece of advice you'd give to them?
Do it. And you're going to fail, probably, because the one thing for me that I was always scared of when I was 18 was failing something. But failure is probably your best friend. And you might be listening to this and thinking, what the hell is he talking about? Like, why do you want to fail? But like, the more you fail, and failing for me means that you put yourself out there and you've taken a chance, right? And you learn so much more from your failures than you do with your victories, in my opinion. And failure, I've had lots of failures. And one of my favorite quotes is a quote by Michael Jordan, where he talks about the amount of like shots he's taken and the amount that he's missed, but he still has taken those shots. So my advice to anyone is, like, if you have an idea about something, you want to do it, but you're just not sure, like your foot's kind of like half in the idea, but you're a little bit worried. It's like when you're dipping your toe in the water to go swimming, right? Like, just jump in, because you could drown, right? But you could also float. And in a weird way, it's all about trying something that puts you out of your comfort zone. And you're not alone in this. Like, one thing that I've realized probably now with like experience is that there's so many people out there that are doing incredible things. There's, like you said, there's so much synergy and there's so much cohesion, is that if you are struggling, just ask people as well. But if you have an idea, for me, it's always that idea didn't just come into your head like randomly. It's because you've either subconsciously thought about it, or it's something you really want to do, and just go for it, because you don't know what can happen, right?
Yeah. I think it's important to strip off all your emotions, your fear, your anxiety, your ego, everything, and just let yourself be free. And I think that's a beauty in it in itself, of being human and trying out all of these new things. Well, Rahul, I'm going to have to stop us there, only because I know we could go on for hours and have a really great chat, but just for the sake of podcasting, we'll keep it short for now. But I'm sure I'll have you back on the show at some point again, maybe in the next pandemic.
No, please, no more.
But hopefully
no
not. Well, thank you for joining me today, Rahul.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the time, and looking forward to releasing your video relatively soon as well.
Oh yeah.
So we'll be.
Yeah. That was a couple of months ago. I probably sounded quite different then. I feel like I've grown so much within the last month in itself, just through the podcast. I feel like a different person already. So it'd be interesting to see what I was thinking 2 months ago. But anyway, I'll leave that to you. That's your project. I'll let you do the magic there. Well, thank you, Rahul.
Thank you. Bye.
And thank you, dear listeners, for joining me again for another episode of Meenal's World. I actually lost count with the number of episodes we're on right now, but we're almost hitting the 10th episode, which is a milestone in itself, because with Desi Outsiders, I was looking to hit 100, but it doesn't matter. We'll start from the beginning again, and hopefully we'll get there at some point. But you can see Rahul's work in the link that I've provided in the episode description. Don't forget to follow him on Instagram. It's Apne project that you look for when you search on Instagram. And you can even look at Rahul's own photography page, which is Rahul Puri Photography as well. If you have any questions or any suggestions for future episodes, please do message me on Instagram as well, at Meenal's World. I'm also on Twitter and on Facebook with the same handle. You can also mail me at meenalsworldpodcast@gmail.com. So thank you to everybody who's been tuning in. Thank you to all the listeners who've been supporting people like us in the creative industry who are trying to work towards producing good quality content that empowers us and creates a sense of community, so that we can all work together through this pandemic. And thank you to all the frontline workers out there, whether you're working in a hospital or whether you're working in a supermarket or in a petrol station. Even if you are just working towards helping your grandparents, thank you to everybody. And hopefully we'll come out through this as a much stronger community as well. So thank you all for listening, and hope you have a lovely weekend.